Hello everyone, welcome back to the Hawk Girls and Hockey Podcast. My name is Sarah. If you're new here, this is the show where we talk about all things hockey, the what to knows, the who to knows, and everything in between. And for my American listeners, happy Thanksgiving. I'm not filming this on Thanksgiving, obviously, but if you're watching this when it comes out, it is currently Thanksgiving here in the US. So I hope you have a great meal, no matter how big or small it is. Enjoy your turkey, or if you don't like turkey, you don't eat turkey, then enjoy whatever it is that you're making. And today's episode is going to be the long-awaited history of women's hockey / the PWHL. This is something that I've been wanting to make an episode on, but life got in the way, and now I am making it. So I'm very, very excited to get into everything that I've researched. I'm putting the history part plus the PWH part together into one episode as opposed to making two separate, because as sad as it is, the PWHL doesn't have a ton of history because they were just established not too long ago, which we'll get into that, okay? I'll be towards the end. Be patient. But yeah, so it's all gonna be in one episode. I was inspired to get it out as soon as possible because of the 2 new expansion teams that the PWHL just received. So that kind of catapulted me to be like, okay, I need to get on top of this because it's a hot topic right now. And then speaking of hot topics, okay, so I wanted to just, before we get into anything, heated fucking rivalry. If you don't know what I'm talking about, I talked about it 2 episodes ago, but Heated Rivalry is a show that is going to be premiering actually this week, the week that I'm filming this. So after Thanksgiving, I think it comes out on November 29th, I believe. I'll fact check for my video listeners right here. And originally is based off of a book of the same name. It's part of this series by an author named Rachel Reed. She has a series of books called Game Changers, and it is primarily romance, which is male. So it is queer romance, bisexual, gay, queer, however you want to say it. I go into the whole what people say it's based upon in my episode before, 2 episodes, whatever, when I talked about it. But it's basically a story of 2 rookie hockey players that are both poised to go number 1. And they're just kind of pitted against each other. One's from Canada, one's from Russia, and they start hooking up and keep a secret kind of FWB, pretty much, or EWB, if you know, you know. And they keep that up for a long time. The book spans a couple of years, and it just goes into the whole dynamic of them falling for each other, and also just coming to terms with their own sexualities and figuring out how the world around them will react to them when they decide to come out, either with each other or just by themselves. And it is such, I finally went and read the books, and it is such a well-written book, both the original one, Heated Rivalry, as well as The Long Game. I cried so much reading The Long Game. The plane scene, if you know, you know. Oh, the candles. Shane and Ilya have my heart in a literal fucking vice grip, and then so do Connor and Hudson, who are the actors playing Shane and Ilya. They've been doing press junkets and stuff for the premiere of the show. They've been doing them in Canada, and I had already loved watching their content on the Heated Rivalries TikTok page, but them and their chemistry, in the sneak peek that we had of the gym scene, and just their chemistry with each other as actors on screen and off screen. It's just, they could not have picked better people to play these two men. And I am just literally, I am so excited. I had no one to talk to about this until a friend of the pod, the Hockey Princess, she DM'd me, and we have just been gabbing about how excited we are. We already were excited for the off-campus series, and then she's like, hey, have you like read Heated Rivalry? I was like, oh my god, I actually just finished the long game. And she's like, I have literally no one to talk to about this. I'm like, dude, me too. So shout out, love you. I am literally so fucking excited. It originally was only going to come out on this streaming service called Crave, which is only in Canada, but us as the fans made such like an uproar. We were like, international release. And you know what they said? Bet. HBO Max said bet for at least the US. And they were like, we'll get you Heated Rivalry. So now who has an HBO Max subscription? Well, it's my dad's, but I created my own account on it. So I'm so excited for this. Oh my gosh, yeah, guys, I have actually no idea. But yeah, I wanted to talk about that. Also, just wanted to talk about, I went to the Sharks versus Bruins game on the 23rd with my dad. He's a Bruins fan, if you do not know, and I'm obviously a Sharks fan. I mean, duh, if you're watching this on the video version, I'm literally surrounded by Shark shit. But Sharks won. Slay, 3-1. Oh, gorgeous game. I was kind of not liking the lack of fighting. They really weren't letting people fight, and I wanted to see, because Macklin was like scoring up with somebody, and so was Sam Dickinson, who, if you don't know, is my new favorite player. Love him, so good. And they just like were not letting the boys fight, which stupid, but whatever. Sharks won, so that was great. It was my first Shark win of the season that I've seen in person. Obviously, I've watched them win when I streamed their games, but it was just an all-around great game. I loved it. I had such a good time. Sorry to my dad, because every time I've taken him to a game, my team's won. So yeah, but he had a really good time too, so I was really happy about that. Okay, all right, enough yapping about the things that have been happening. Let's get into today's episode. So I do have the Sharks Cup, but it does not have a black cherry hard seltzer in it. It has some cranberry apple juice in it, because I didn't feel like drinking today. I wanted to have like a nice little fun non-alcoholic bev. So if you want to grab a juice, soda, coffee, tea, if you want to drink, don't let me stop you. Get a little snack, and let's just get into the history of women's hockey in the PWHL. Cheers. A special shout out to my new notebook. This will really only benefit my video watchers. I ran out of pages in the notebook that I was using for the show for all my notes and everything and all my research, and so I had to go and get a new one. And I was just gonna get like a regular spiral one, or just like a boring one, and then I saw this guy, which is a pink fluffy, it has, you can't really tell, but it's like has little hearts all over it, and it is just the epitome of girly. And I thought, my iPad has a bright pink case on it. My nails right now are like a hot, sparkly pink. What better place to put all my notes about hockey than in a hyper feminine, fuzzy pink heart designed notebook. So yeah, special shout out to this. Shout out Target. I'm not sponsored, but this is where I got it. It's only $10. And now let's get into the episode. So I want to start all the way back in the 1800s. So if you need a refresher on just the history of hockey in general, I do have an episode about that. It's one of like the first 5. I can't remember. You can go back and listen to it or watch it. But I had mentioned how the 1800s really was the time when hockey was at like or kind of running up to be super, 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 super popular in Canada, because it had its roots over in Europe, if you don't remember. And so the 1800s, it's Canada, right? There's that guy I mentioned, Lord Stanley, the one who the cup is named after, and he's one who actually, donated the cup to the to be given to the best hockey club in Canada. Now, obviously, it's the Stanley Cup that we know now. But I do mention in my Stanley Cup episode as well how he had a wife, and he also had children. And one of his children was a daughter, and her name was Isabel Stanley. And so Isabel, like, right off the bat, really loved hockey as soon as she saw her brothers playing it, and I think her dad also dabbled in it too, but she started really, really liking hockey. So then she asked her dad, like, can I play as well? And he was like, yeah, sure, I don't see the problem with that. So she is actually very known for being one of the very first women to be photographed playing the sport. And if you ever want to see like such fascinating pieces of history, look up what women would wear playing hockey back in the 1800s / like early 1900s, because if you don't know, women really were not supposed to wear anything that looked super manly. Case in point, a lot of these teams, when they would play in very, very long skirts. They would have like sweaters on and stuff that had obviously their team logo on it, but they would all wear really long skirts up until eventually pants started becoming the norm for women's wear. And then they switched over to pants, and then actually more official, uniforms with padding and everything like that, leading up to what we have today. But it is just fascinating looking at all the photos of these women who played hockey back in the 1800s / early 1900s, and just like making do with really what they had to wear, because they really weren't allowed to wear a lot of manly stuff. So they were playing these ice hockey games in long skirts. It was kind of a sleigh, if I'm being honest. And so with all this, women had been learning and playing the sport of ice hockey, and the very first recorded game of women's ice hockey was in Ottawa, Canada on February 11th of 1891. Obviously, games had been played, maybe a little pickup games between two groups of gals who loved hockey, but this was just the first time that a game was actually put down on paper. It was put in a newspaper in Ottawa, and it was just the first recorded instance of a structured, put together game of this team and this team were playing against each other. This is what happened. This is who won. And that was in 1891. And then the first women's hockey club was created in 1894 at Queen's University in Kingston, Ontario, Canada. So hockey club is just essentially a very fun name of just saying a hockey team, because they are known as clubs. That's why Utah Hockey Club was called Utah Hockey Club for a long time, until finally they kind of got their head out of their ass and got themselves a mascot. And this hockey club that was created was first called the Love Me Littles, which I read was kind of a nod to the fact that men did not love the concept of women playing ice hockey a lot. So they were like, well, we'll just make the very first women's hockey club name a nod to that. And then eventually it was changed to the Morning Glories, which they're known as being the very first kind of revolutionary team of women's ice hockey, especially back in this day. And with the creation of this team would spread the creation of other universities in Canada to create their own hockey teams. So by the beginning of the 1900s, there were women hockey clubs at various universities in various parts of Canada, like Quebec, Ontario, Toronto, etc. And some notable ones include the Preston Rivulets, the Vancouver Amazons, the Ottawa Alerts, and the Rosslyn Ladies hockey team, just to name a few. And so these teams would all play against each other on this university level, but there really wasn't a kind of standardized championship a la NCAA like the men had. And I will get to that because it actually won't be until a really long fucking time until the NCAA gives ladies their flowers, but I will get into that once I do. So, I mean, don't hold your breath. It'll be a while. And so these teams were thriving and really dominating, and I would even say that they had their peak of popularity during this time in the early to mid 1900s, up until around 1939, which my history people would know it's wartime, and that kind of slowed the roll of the not prevalence of women's hockey, because obviously they still existed, but they were more focused on literally everything else because the world was at war. So ice hockey in general was not very rampant at this time, and especially women's ice hockey kind of took like a pause, and it would be a couple of years until they really kind of gained up speed again, you know, after the war ended and like the men came home and they didn't have to take care of their families or their parents or whatever their situation was. It wouldn't be until after that when the whole women's hockey revolution would kind of pick up again, which leads us to the first and not the last, but definitely the first fight for equality for women's hockey. I'm not going to go into every court case that has gone on or any like fights that have gone on for equality in women's hockey. I just wanted to bring this one up because it was the very first one. So around the mid 1950s, there was a little girl named Abby, and she really wanted to play on a boys hockey team, but they said, no, you're a girl, you cannot play on a boys hockey team. So she went ahead and she changed her name to Abe and cut her hair and kind of like made herself to look like a little boy. And then so she then was able to join the team until the team found out that Abe was actually Abby, and Abe was a girl. And then they suspended her from the team, to which her parents took the team to court, more specifically the Ontario Supreme Court, where her parents and Abby would win, and Abby was able to play on the team. But this was just one of the first of many fights to make an equal playing field for women to play hockey, because they obviously had their own hockey clubs in the universities and stuff, but it was a whole different story with younger girls with wanting to play hockey, and there just weren't a ton of just only little like girls, juniors, one would say, hockey teams. So the only way they could really play on a sanctioned team was to try and hopefully join a boys team, which most cases did not work out in their favor, but this case definitely helped out a lot. And then in 1964, it was when Brown University, which is here in the U.S. in Rhode Island, was the first U.S. University to create a women's hockey team. And this team was called the Pembroke Pandas. And this would start the trend for more universities and / colleges here in the U.S. to create their own women's teams. And some notable teams from this time that were created that still are around to this day were the Yale Bulldogs, the Princeton Tigers, the Cornell Big Reds women's ice hockey program, and the Harvard Crimson women's ice hockey team. And these were all created after Pembroke Pandas were created. They were created in the early to mid 1970s, and they, like I said, they still exist to this day. You can literally follow their fucking TikTok pages for like Harvard's team and Yale's team and stuff. They are slay, love them. And then in 1975 was when the Ontario Women's Hockey Association was established. This would mark the very first group that was dedicated specifically to helping women's hockey grow and declare equality. And then in 1987 was when the first World Women's Championships were played. So I would say that the 1980s to 1990s were some of the bigger years for advancing women's hockey, not even just here in the US and in Canada, but also internationally. There were many different countries that had started establishing their own women's hockey clubs, like Germany, Finland, China, Sweden, teams like that over in Europe and in Asia, which made the establishment of the first women's world championships, just that much more special, because it gave not even just US and Canadian players a chance to shine, but also women around the world. And then 2 years later, in 1989, was when the first International Ice Hockey Europe Women's Championship. A year later was when we finally got the Women's Worlds, which, if you don't know what Worlds were or /are, they are a championship tournament that many NHL players will go and play in, and they have a juniors world, and then they have a worlds for men's. And then in 1990 was when they first established the women's worlds. And then 2 years later, after the women's worlds was established, was actually when another woman made some history. Her name is, and I'm going to mispronounce it, I'm really, really sorry, Manon Rhéaume, Rhéaume, Rheaume. I'm gonna say Rhéaume. I'm so sorry. She became the first woman to play a period of an NHL exhibition game when she played for the Tampa Bay Lightning. This was, again, in 1992. It wasn't in, an actual NHL game, but she made history playing as a woman for the first time with an NHL team. So slay, love that. And then at the turn of the millennium in 1999 was when there was the first professional league for women's hockey founded in, where else but Canada, called the National Women's Hockey League. And this was ran by the aforementioned OWHA, the Ontario Women's Hockey Association. And then 2 years later was when finally the NCAA Women's Ice Hockey Championship began. Mind you, the teams that had been played in this very first fucking tournament for the NCAA Women's Ice Hockey Championship, they've existed since 1970. It is 2001 when these teams were founded. The biggest hits on the radio were probably songs by Led Zeppelin and fucking Elton John and so on and so forth. And now it's 2001, there's shit like S Club 7 on the radio, and now they're like, oh, you guys can finally have your own NCAA tournament. It's like, fuck you, but also thank you, but also fuck you for shaking so long. And they would name this tournament the National Collegiate Women's Ice Hockey Championship. Isn't that a long name? So at this point, women had been slaying the hockey game. I completely forgot to mention this, but back in 1998 was when there was the first instance of women's ice hockey played at the Winter Olympics, where this first, Olympic where they were able to play, the 1998 Winter Olympics, USA won gold, so slay. So they had been, making names for themselves in their sport, respectively. Obviously, they weren't, as renowned as the men's players, but they were making a name for themselves, and they were slaying the game in their own right, just for lack of a better word. But it wasn't even until 2010 when the very first women were inducted into the Hockey Hall of Fame in Toronto, Canada. These three women obviously being Cammie Granato, Geraldine Heaney, and Angela James, and they were inducted respectively for their each position and skill set, and they made history as being the first woman to be inducted into the Hockey Hall of Fame. So now we're leading up until recent years. So in 2019 was when the PWHPA was established, which is the Professional Women's Hockey's Players Association, which is the same thing as the NHLPA, the National Hockey League Players Association, where they are both associations that specialize in making sure that players are treated right, that their contracts are not, fucking them over. Basically, just kind of like unions, but looking out for the players. So this was created to help out these women, especially because as time was going on, they had rumblings of a professional women's hockey league for USA and Canadian teams was kind of in the works to be made. So they wanted to, I assume, make sure that if/when this happens, that these players are, fairly compensated for their skills and that they are being treated well by this association, whatever it is. Which leads us to the establishment of the Professional Women's Hockey League, or the PWHL. So this league was a long time in the making. There was a lot of moving pieces until eventually in 2023, news came out that there was going to be a new Professional Women's Hockey League. Essentially, and I don't like comparing it to like men's stuff, but it essentially is the NHL, but for women. And they started out the whole shebang with 6 teams. These teams being the Montreal Victoire, the Ottawa Charge, the Toronto Scepters, the Boston Fleet, the Minnesota Frost, and the New York Sirens. These are lovingly known as the original 6 of the PWHL. If you know, you know. If you don't, it's literally all around right now because it's 100 years for the other original 6. And the championship trophies / name of the playoffs for the PWHL is the Walter Cup. So that was also established. And the very first game that was played in the PWHL was between Toronto and New York on January 1st of 2024. So literally only almost 2 years ago. Crazy. That time also flies so fast, but also that this was only about 2 years ago. And the winner so far, there's only been 2 Walter Cups, but the winner so far for both of them was the Minnesota Frost. So slay, ladies. I went and watched like the obviously because I didn't watch them live, but I did go and I watched the final games for those. And women's hockey is just so, I don't want to say it's so much more fun than men's hockey, but like they're a lot scrappier, I gotta say. It was just way more entertaining. But don't tell the Sharks I said that. And then, like I mentioned at the beginning of this episode / segment, whatever, this year, 2025, we actually got 2 new expansion teams. We got the Seattle Torrent and the Vancouver Golden Eyes. Not a lot of people liked those names, but you know what? They're not the worst. And it's just, to me, it's just room for more expansion teams to come in. So we will take our flowers and we will be thankful for them. And now we're up to speed with women's hockey right now. Some notable PWHL players are Hillary Knight, Megan Keller, and Ashton Bell. And yeah, these ladies are just awesome. I follow a lot of the teams / a lot of these players on TikTok, and their content is just so entertaining, and them as players are entertaining. If you haven't been keeping up with women's hockey and PWHL, I have a feeling that it's going to just get bigger from now on, and I cannot wait to see how big it does get and just how much these women are going to be thriving in their careers. I'm very, very excited about it. So yeah, that is it for today's episode. Thank you guys so much for voting on this topic. It was very fascinating to research, and I mean, it's something that I had been following for a while, and it was just nice to go and actually look at the nitty gritty and look at all the dates that all these things happened, because they're so spaced apart as opposed to like the NHL teams and their history and the history of men's hockey, which like this happened, then it's like long stretches of time in between all these accomplishments for women's hockey that would have happened faster if they were men, but whatever. But yeah, so thank you so much for watching / listening to this episode. Next week's is going to be, of course, me building my Team USA for the Olympics with the fucking magnets. If you know, you know. If you don't, well, you will know because it will be next week's episode. So look forward to that. If you are watching this on YouTube, please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. It does help out a lot. If you're listening to this on Spotify, please make sure to give the show a good rating. You can also follow the show on Instagram. It is at Hot Girls Learn Hockey. That's where I post any polls for episode topics, if I post if an episode's going to be delayed, etc., etc. You can also follow the show's TikTok page, which is at HGLH Pod. Also, while you're at it, go give a follow to the Hockey Princess too. She's amazing in her content. I love it so much. But yeah, thank you guys so much for tuning into today's episode. I love you guys this much, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.